What's going on, everybody? French Fit coming back with another video, some more training thoughts here. Wanted to take a couple minutes just to talk about some thoughts I've been having on relative versus absolute intensity and going to failure. So I made an Instagram post a while back about why you should maybe be doing a few more AMRAP sets. I think they're very underutilized. And along with that post and just some podcasts I've been listening to and some thinking I've been doing in the old brain of mine, just wanted to give some thoughts on intensity and how we often track intensity and why we a lot of times overthink it. So when we think about intensity in workouts, there's a few different ways to do it. There's percentage based, working off a percentage of a tested 1RM or a predicted 1RM. There's RPE, or rating of perceived exertion. That's usually like a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being all out and 1 being super easy. And then RIR, which is very similar to RPE. It's reps in reserve. It's basically inverted RPE, so with a 0 RIR being absolute failure and like a 5 RIR being like a super easy set. So while I think these can be useful tools, I think we can all agree that percentages obviously are predetermined after you get that 1RM or that estimated 1RM. But when it comes to estimating intensity with RIR or RPE, these more kind of auto-regulated methods, because that's one of the pros that people always talk about is, it's kind of auto-regulated to how you're going to feel that day. But I think we can all agree that most people are pretty trash at estimating how hard something is. If something's actually an 8, it might be a 6 or it might actually be a 10. People aren't really good at estimating how many reps they have left in the tank. And I think that can be partially because people don't do full-out AMRAP sets very often. So some of the things that I've been thinking about is a lot of times the exercise you choose, as well as how you feel in your sleep and recovery, is often going to dictate how hard you can go. Like, for example, you can get a lot closer to failure when you're doing machine exercises versus like a more skilled movement, like a barbell squat or a barbell movement or something like that. It's going to be a little more difficult to go to failure because there's more skill involved. There's different muscle groups working as opposed to like a more isolated machine. So keep in mind that that's going to dictate a lot how hard you can go, and it's also going to dictate the absolute versus the absolute intensity too. I can go to failure on like a goblet squat, but I'm going to be limited by probably the highest dumbbell that I have in the gym I'm working out, or how much weight can you really hold here in a goblet. You're probably not going to find a dumbbell over 125 to 150 pounds. I can go to absolute failure on that, and that's still probably going to be less overall systemically fatiguing than if I do a heavy back squat to quote-unquote failure. I probably won't get to failure, but it's probably going to be an overall greater stress because it's more absolute load, it's axial loading, there's a lot more moving parts to that. It's just a more systemically fatiguing exercise. So that's just something to keep in mind there. Sleep and recovery is also going to play a huge factor in how hard you can go. And if you feel like shit and still give good effort, you're more likely to get a stimulus versus, I'm just going to coast. Because I think we can all agree, the more you train and the more, whether you're an athlete or if you're just someone that enjoys training and is going to do this throughout their life, rarely are you going to feel like 100%. Rarely are you going to feel perfectly rested. All right, I got perfect amount of sleep, my nutrition's on point. Obviously, for some people that's easier than others, but if we're always waiting to feel super good, we're probably never going to train very hard. So you might as well maintain effort at a high level. That way, on the days you do feel really good, you might as well send it, take advantage of that, get a really good stimulus, and then you'll know, even though on the days you do feel like shit, you still give good effort, and you're still probably doing a better job of getting that stimulus versus just like coasting on those days. And yeah, a lot of times we're going to feel like shit. Otherwise, you'll never train hard if you just keep waiting for that day where you're 100%. And I think this goes especially for accessory movements. Obviously on main movements like, a heavy barbell movement or an Olympic lift or something like that, you're probably not trying to go to failure most of the time. You're probably trying to chase something like max strength or some sort of ballistic effort. But a lot of times I think accessories, what are they mostly used for? They're usually a little bit higher reps. I think when we think about accessories and the way people use them, they're generally targeted towards hypertrophy and tissue tolerance, which means generally higher reps, or at the very least going close to muscular failure, driving that micro damage into the tissue and getting a ton of metabolic stress into the tissue, which necessitates going super close to failure. So if you're just doing mild, your sets of, accessory work to mild discomfort with when really you got like 5 reps left in the tank, you're really kind of wasting your time. And I think that goes into the fact of time efficiency too. If you do 2 all-out sets on, say, like an accessory movement, say you have like a dumbbell row or a lat pull down, 2 sets of all-out to failure, balls to the wall, is going to get you a lot more stimulus in less time than 3, 4, 5 sets of just mild discomfort where you're, 3, 4, 5 reps left in reserve. And another thing I think is important, the AMRAP sets are also helpful. 1, just a gut check, and 2, if you are looking to use these things like RPE, RIR to track your intensity, I think a way to get better at those is taking sets to actual failure. Then you know how it actually feels like. It's really tough to gauge how far you are away from failure if you never actually go to failure. Like if you never actually go to failure, how are you really supposed to know if that's 2 reps left in the tank? Versus if you touch that from time to time, not saying you have to do it every single day, but from time to time, then you know what that feels like physically and psychologically, and that's going to help you kind of rate that perceived exertion or rate how many reps you think you have left in the tank. In the long run, I think that's going to help you be more accurate of that if that is the way you choose to track your intensity during your workouts. And like I said, it's also just a good gut check, regardless of what people say. I think it's just good to do something really hard once in a while. And like I said, the time efficiency. And one last point is it just takes away a lot of the thinking. A lot of times, you're thinking about, okay, whatever the technique is, if it's a less skilled movement, maybe not as much, but you're thinking about, okay, this is starting to hurt. Also, how many reps left do I have in the tank? Now, you could also look at that as a good thing, being able to think at multiple things at once, multiple stimuluses and having to react to them. That's obviously very pertinent in sports. But, from a personal anecdote, not saying this is true for anyone else, a lot of times the best training sessions I have are when I don't think and just exert a lot of effort and push myself about as hard as I can. And a lot of times it takes less time because I don't need as many sets, and you oftentimes get a better stimulus on there anyway. So if you find yourself overthinking of, when it comes to RIR or RPE, maybe that's a good time to take a few weeks and just try a couple of AMRAP sets, especially on your accessory movements. Instead of doing 3, 4, 5 sets of, 1 to 2 RIR, just try to go to 0 RIR, which a lot of times you're probably not going to know what that feels like, so you're only going to be able to get to that 1 RIR anyway. And over time, you're actually going to know what that true failure feels like and be able to rate your rating of perceived exertion or reps in reserve better over time. So just some random thoughts on relative versus absolute intensity going to failure. Take it with a grain of salt. Just my opinion. Everyone's got one, kind of like an asshole. Doesn't mean you need to hear them all. But if you came to this far in the video, that means you just heard mine. Give it a like if you do enjoy, and stay tuned.